Brendon, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, mate. How are you?
Good. Awesome to meet you, Ryan. Absolutely perfect.
I have been dying to have this conversation. I've been following the incredible journey that you've had over the last year with the long paddle. I think we were just talking off air, weren't we? That we were connected by a good friend in common, Matt Hill. Matt was a guest on my podcast a couple of years ago. And I remember reaching out to him and saying, I reached out to my audience. I'm looking for a paddleboard. What should I get? And you were the first person that he recommended. Tell us what you have been up to. Tell us what you've been up to this year, mate. It's been a bit of a journey, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm keen to know, did you get your paddleboard?
I did. I got a big one. I got a big one. We've been out on it many times. It's just, I love it. I love being on the water.
You've got lots of really interesting inland waterways your way, haven't you? So, lots of nice, settled, placid water.
Yeah, which you would have been grateful for, I'm sure, over the last 4 or 5 months.
Absolutely. Wow. 18 months ago, I decided to do a really big thing and paddle around Great Britain. So that started on the 27th of April after quite a bit of planning and preparation and training. And on the 27th of April, I started a circumnavigation of mainland Britain and achieved it on the 12th of September, having paddled 141 days and 4,000 kilometers and 5 world records.
5 world. What are those world records?
So, off the top of my head, the circumnavigation of Britain, which is the first time that's ever been done, and a time of 141 days. The first person to have paddled from Land's End to John O'Groats via the coast. Yeah. One that I'm particularly proud of is the world's longest ever SUP journey, which is around the 4,000. It's still got to be verified, around the 4,000 kilometers, which breaks the previous record by over 1,500 kilometers.
Wow.
The fastest circumnavigation of Wales, 14 days, and the first and fastest circumnavigation of Scotland in 46 days.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. And I think it was 8 million paddle strokes.
Yeah, that's a really difficult one we had to work out. So give or take 100,000, it is about 8 million paddle strokes, which is unbelievable to think of when you just do one.
Yeah. Let alone the forces of the waves and the water, because it's very different. The thing, because you talked about the nice inland kind of routes, but I've been on the sea a couple of times. You know, we were in Abbey when you passed the Welsh coast, and I was hoping to meet to come and see you, but the times just didn't cross. But you know, it's very, very different being on the sea. The power and the force of the waves is such difference to the nice little rivers I'm able to go down here. How did you look after your body, your shoulders, your core? Like, did that take some prep? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's really is more about the kind of the experience that you have on the sea, and that's so important to undertake something like this, because a paddleboard in placid, calm waters, you know, it's just like a floating cork, whereas in the sea, it's getting thrown all over the place. So, yeah, that's a big part to it. I gave myself 4 months of hard preparation, and I think that's the most important aspect, with others that came along that kept me away from any injuries over the 4.5 months. And the way I trained to paddle for breaks. So what I mean by that is I trained to paddle for 4 hours non-stop 3 times a day, or 6 hours non-stop twice a day. So that was the kind of mental as well as physical training I needed to know, that actually you focus for 4 hours and you paddle non-stop, or you paddle for 6 hours non-stop, then you give yourself 20, 30 minutes break, and then you do the same again. And that sort of mindset readied myself, body and mind, to undertake the 4.5 months.
That's nuts. So of the 141 days, how many were on the water?
Well, 23 of those days were totally off the water because of really bad weather. And then about another 30 days conditions were bad, so that we could only manage anything from 2K to sort of 8K, but all of those were under 10K.
So I reached out to my audience and said, I'm having Brendon on. He's done this incredible challenge. What questions have you got? And my son Corey, he's asked a question, and so him and I got up at sunrise in Aberystwyth to we were on holiday and we wanted to see the sunrise on the paddleboard. So we got up at like 4:30 in the morning to get out on the water, and that water was cold, man. Like it was painful on the feet. We didn't have the appropriate kind of footwear or covers. Corey's question is, what time would you have to get up every single day to get on the board?
Well, timings were very much to do with what the weather was doing and what the tides were doing. But when you're circumnavigating an island, you actually chase the tide so that you stay pretty much with it as you travel. So normally on the tides every day, it's a 50-minute difference. So over the course of the week, you could be paddling an hour later or earlier every day. But when you're chasing it around, you often just stick with it for long periods of time. So it was really annoying that we had lots of occasions where the tide was right at 4 a.m. and you had to paddle every day at 4 a.m. before that tide changed. And it might have been a week or 2 weeks before that happened. But it was never like that for 11 o'clock or nice late starts. It was only ever early starts. So yeah, that feeling of getting up at 4, that alarm going off, being on the water by 4:30 in cold, wet kit, never really leaves you, and never really it never becomes better. It just is what it is, and you get on with it.
Yeah, before we get, I've got loads of questions I want to ask you about your experiences, but before we get too far, I just want to get back to the heart of why, why you even bothered. And I understand that, it all comes back to this time in October 2014. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about your heart, your motivation for this challenge?
Yeah, and it's, as you say, 8 million paddle strokes. I can't begin to imagine doing something like that unless I had real motivation to do it. That motivation stems from 30 years of seeing people in trouble on the water. If you're a waterman, if you're out on the water lots, pretty much any time I ever go out on the sea, I'm helping somebody in some way, shape or form. It's relentless, and especially now that in the last 2 or 3 years, even more people are enjoying the water and getting out there, which is amazing, but just don't have the skills and knowledge to support that enthusiasm to get on the water. So I set up a surf lifesaving club in Torbay to help train lifeguards and get more people in the schools teaching water safety. I set up a charity to do the same, and the worst point of that journey of water safety campaigning was a time when I was off duty as a lifeguard. I've been a lifeguard for 20 years as a volunteer lifeguard. And I was in North Cornwall, and a situation where the conditions were pretty awful. And unfortunately, 3 souls lost their lives. And I was part of trying to retrieve those souls and resuscitate those souls in front of their families. And it's hard hitting. It's hard hitting when you see families losing a loved one. And I mean whole families, as in parents, grandparents, children, cousins, aunties, uncles, all there, because that's often the case with drowning. You're celebrating, you're having a great time, you're on holiday, you're enjoying the water for the right reasons, and then something tragic like drowning happens, and that changes everything. It's catastrophic. So witnessing, going through that means that I've always said to myself from that moment on, I didn't want another family to have to go through that grief, that trauma. So, I've doubled my efforts. I retired myself from daytime teaching, as a school teacher, to focus solely on this. But I wasn't hitting the 9 million children we've got in this country. I wasn't getting to all those 9 million children because it's difficult to do that unless you've got media support. So I thought, let's do something a little bit that most people think is a bit crazy, but is very on topic at the minute, which is paddleboarding. I paddleboarded for 15 years, so it's not new to me. I love it. I've been doing it, racing, expeditioning, getting out there. So it just was a natural progression for me to combine my efforts with something I love doing, which is paddleboarding, and paddleboard around our whole country.
Thank you for going there. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that, I've seen a number of your kind of interviews and your videos, and it takes you right back, doesn't it? You can't relive those experiences without almost, feeling it. And I know that's, such a tragedy. I understand that in the situation you were only one of the only one that knew how to do, resuscitation as CPR. Is that, is that
important? Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues surrounding self-preservation, both on the water and on the beach. We're not taught in this country water safety. We're not taught drowning prevention, and part of that is the ability to resuscitate. It's mind-boggling that we do not focus on something. I mean, I think every human will witness somebody in some form of cardiac arrest or issue that needs resuscitation at least 3 times in their life. Wow. And yet only something ridiculous like 9% of people even receive any form of training on resuscitation. So who knows in that situation if more people would have known resuscitation than myself, if we could have done something. But there are plenty of scenarios where resuscitation saves lives. And that's just one of the aspects of what I'm trying to push with water safety and drowning prevention, because it's all part of it.
Yeah, and when you're at least on duty, that responsibility as a lifeguard is a burden you carry. But on that day, it was, I imagine, solely looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, I was in that time of year on that particular beach. There are no lifeguards present. I was going there to surf myself. I was standing at the water's edge on completely the other side of the beach, because that was the only bit that I potentially could have surfed, because it was 10-foot conditions. And I was standing there with my board thinking, no, I'm not going for this. This is going to be too brutal. And the other side of the beach, it wasn't even a possibility that you could have surfed there. And there we had lots of people going into the water. If they had an understanding of how water works, how coastal waters work, tides, rips, waves, on that particular beach, it has a breaking, crumbling wave that turns to white water for huge periods of time, sort of 100 meters. And when it bounds off the cliffs, that 100 meters becomes 200 meters. And the thing about white water is you can't swim in it because it's not enough buoyancy. So you sink down to the water, which means there's no air. And in those sort of conditions, you might have 2, 3, 4, 5 foot of just frothy white water, brutal conditions to try and do anything in, let alone enjoy the water. And that was the conditions for the day. And, as part of the coroner's court, I was an expert witness on that. That all helped for me to understand the scenario and how, as an off-duty lifeguard, my options were beyond limited in trying to help, other than unfortunately pulling bodies in. So yeah, that's that whole scenario, and so many others that unfortunately I've witnessed or been out on the water and seen, from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, only in the last 6 months of traveling around Britain, and I've seen some ridiculous scenarios where people think they can go from sheltered inland waters to coastal waters and don't understand that it's completely different, and you have so many more factors to consider to paddle safely when you're on the coast.
So, another question that I've had from one of my audience members is this idea of loneliness. You just talk about nearly 12 hours on the water on your own, like 12 hours with myself. Like, I don't mind my own company, but like 12 hours, like, how were you? Did you experience loneliness? How did you deal with it?
Yeah. Incredibly lonely.
Mm.
Incredibly lonely. Especially when you are in the likes of Scotland, where you can go a week without seeing any other form of human life.
Mm.
And that seems astonishing on a country as small as ours, with the amount of people we've got. But there are some really barren places, not just in Scotland, but in Wales and in England, where you can go days without seeing anyone else. So incredibly lonely. But I've never let that get to me, in that you use the time constructively. Mm. So I average 10 hours, 15 minutes on the water every day. So you've got to keep the mind busy, because the mind is a fairly negative thing left to its own devices. Mm-hmm. So you don't let it go its own route. You entertain it the whole time. So I had a structure in place that took 2 weeks really to kind of get fully into place. And then once that was in place, it's astounded me how a 12-hour paddle can just go like that, because of how you're keeping yourself entertained in the mind. And a lot to do with that is, I don't know much about meditation as such, but I know about how to keep the mind focused.
Yeah.
And if I didn't know as well as I did before I started, I truly do now, because there aren't many people who have had as much time to themselves like I have over the last 4.5 months. And you learn to focus solely on individual things, and you also learn to play crazy games. So the most one people mostly love are the time it took me 3 days to name every human being I know. It's focusing and doing crazy things like that, but also going into incredible detail in your mind, and the time just goes past. It really does. And at the same time, being switched on. You can't lose yourself in your thoughts, because you've got to be switched on to continually monitor the weather and the tides and the conditions around you, because you could, your day's plan of paddling could change dramatically in 15 minutes if the conditions change.
I wonder whether your subconscious is much more competent after 15 years, but not long after learning how to paddleboard, I was down on the south coast near Sandbanks kind of area. And over the bay was the Royal International Air. It was like a air show, and the red arrows were going around kind of Bournemouth. And I remember just taking my eye off what I was doing, looking around at the red arrows for one moment, and I was straight in the water. Like, is that something that you're so confident, competent, and you don't, or is it taxing? Are you having to constantly focus and for the full journey?
No, it's a bit like driving a car, really.
Yeah.
You drive a car, you don't think about it. You think about all the other aspects. You're not actually thinking about the mechanics of what your feet are doing or what your hands are doing.
What you're saying is I'm highly incompetent.
I'm saying, just like someone who learns to drive a car, it takes a while before you get to that point of not having to think about it anymore.
Yeah. Red arrows.
I think if I was having to think about paddling, the actual mechanics of the paddling, that would become incredibly tiresome. No, I don't. Whether you're the paddle stroke or balance or position on the board, it all just happens naturally, and that comes through years of experience in all those different types of conditions as well.
I don't know whether it's like cliche Eastern philosophy, but were you at one with the paddleboard, at one with the water? Like, how do you take your kind of your philosophical influences?
Yeah, I mean, at one is a I don't know if it's a Ponzi saying or overused saying, or but it's certainly very true that you can't paddle for 10 hours in horrendous conditions if you're not in tune with what the board is doing, the water's doing, your paddle's doing, and how your body is able to cope with that. It would break down very quickly, or you just lose the motivation. I paddled on one particular day on the northwest coast where the wind was really strong, and there were over 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. It just becomes brutally strong in your face. And I started paddling in the morning, and people were walking along I was trying to get as close to the promenade and the concrete structures as possible, because that gives you a little bit of shelter from the winds. And there were people walking past me because I'm going that slowly. And it was entertaining that in the morning, a gentleman walked past with his dog, kind of semi-laughing, and what is this, what is this guy doing on a board? Why didn't he just come in? Why is he doing this? Because not everyone understands what I'm trying to achieve. And about 8 hours later, at the end of the day, when obviously he finished work, he was walking his dog again, and I'm still on that stretch, a couple of kilometers further on, but I'm still on that stretch. And to see the surprise in his face, thinking, it's this guy been doing this all day long. And the thing is, people say, well, why didn't you have the day off then? And the issue is, if you don't do it, no one else comes and does it for you. And if I don't do it today, I've got to do it tomorrow. And those tomorrows soon mount up. So you just had to get out there and do it. And the mindset of that was really important. And only if the conditions were physically dangerous to me or others would I not venture out onto the water.
I do know that you did fall in on one occasion, and I know that it was a bit of a hairy moment.
Yeah, which one are you thinking? Because I fell off 14 times in 4,000 kilometers, and most of the times there was a reason why I fell off, because there was an external element involved. I presume you're talking about orcas. Yeah. Well, it's amazing how many people are surprised to know that we actually have killer whales on the coast of Britain, from Cornwall, which they were seen this year. And I was actually paddling at Porthcurno, and they were paddling around me. I didn't see them, thankfully, because the conditions were so bad, but it was only speaking to the NCI, the National Coach Watch station afterwards, who said, did you sit, how amazing was it you were paddling with those killer whales? And I hadn't seen them.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good thing, because that really would have surprised me in Cornwall, but they are from Cornwall all the way up to Scotland. I did see them in Scotland on 3 occasions, and 3 occasions in one gnarly, horrible evening. And the first time I saw them, I was paddling. As we've been saying, my mind was focused, but it was thinking about other things, especially when the weather's not great. Your peripheral vision closes in because everything just turns grey. And the killer whale swam up behind me. Now, I actually thought that when it came up behind me, it was a boat. And I thought, well, how have I not heard this boat suddenly come so close? So the bow wave actually hit me. And as I turned and looked, it was an orca. These things are magnificently large in the water. And consequently, I actually stepped back to kind of move away from it, and stepped off the board and fell into the water. And of course, what goes through your mind? I knew there potentially could be orcas. There were stories just the day before of 100 kilometers up the coast where orcas were catching seals and playing with them. And there was video footage of them, these seals being flung in all directions by people capturing those moments on the beach up in the north, more northeast. And I was northwest part then. So I knew they were around. But when you're in the water and there's one cruising past the other side of your board, you can't help but think the worst. I know these creatures have never harmed someone in the wild, but they're just so huge and so amazing. So to see this glistening black and white fin just cruise past, and I look directly into this wonderful, magnificent creature's eye as it passed, and I thought, goodness, that's beyond incredible. But I didn't panic. I thought of myself that, I was quite proud of myself that I stayed cool, I didn't panic. So at that moment, then I began the process of just getting back up on my board, and one cruised behind me, and that was almost a bigger surprise because he just literally brushed past my feet, and that did give me a proper start. Amazing. I mean, what a fantastic thing to have experienced. But I can quite honestly say that I wouldn't necessarily go hunting for such an experience ever again. And in fact, I had 2 more encounters with orcas later that evening, to the point that the last encounter I had, I actually thought, it's getting too dark. That these huge predators are becoming too close and having too much interest in me, and I just need to get off the water because it's their feeding time.
Yeah. Wow. And you're the guy out on the board, you're the guy with the heart for doing this, but I know you had a bit of a support crew. Let's shine a light on the good people that supported you. Who were they? What were they doing? What role did they play, and how did they keep you going?
Yeah, I mean, those guys and girls, all part of the team, and you can't do something like this without them. I chose the option of paddling beach to beach rather than having a boat and staying out on a boat, or just when I stop, just getting on the boat. I thought for me, it's more appropriate to show and highlight the water safety, because the biggest issues are often when you're entrance or exit in the water. Mm-hmm. So to have a crew, 2 guys, Will and Harry, in vans sponsored by Peugeot, watching us and guiding us, and those gnarly moments where the huge waves are crashing in and I have to come in. It's really hard when you've never landed on a beach before to see where the rocks are, to see where the rip is, or to see what's going on from the water. So to have them signaling and messaging and guiding me in was so important. So Will and Harry, Will is a professional video photographer, so he was taking all the stills and the video footage for the documentary that we're doing. He's also a surfer, so he gets all that water knowledge and how to guide me. And then Harry, who did everything else and was a general legend to get things sorted, and he's a real problem solver. And you need someone like that on an expedition like this, someone who you just leave to trust to sort things out, and was instrumental in that. And then we had Zoe and Lucy back at base, just answering all the different questions and media and just keeping on a tag on all that. So a fantastic team of support that you can't do this without. And of course, when I mention a team, it goes without saying, again, you can't do something like this unless your wife is part of that team, and children. And they really were how incredibly supportive they was again instrumental in allowing it to happen so smoothly. And I'm incredibly proud that it was a 141-day expedition and nothing went wrong. Nothing went wrong at all. So that comes down to some really good people and some great planning.
And do you know what? Sometimes I go away, like if I go to a festival, camping and stuff, like you just eat like cereal bars, you eat like the occasional pot noodles, eat some. Like, you can't do that. You can't live on pot noodles going 141 days. You have to keep your body healthy. You got 12 hours on the water. Like, the logistics blow my mind. Like, how did you keep fueled and keep good food and good water intake? How did you do the sheer basics of looking after yourself?
Yeah, that's so important. And the body would fall apart very quickly if you weren't fueling it in the right way. So it is hugely important, and also important to preempt everything. So always making sure you're hydrated before you need the water, always making sure the food intake's there, because you will crash. When you're paddling non-stop like that, if you experience a crash on the board 10 miles out and you've got 4 hours before you can get back on to land, that would be disastrous. So it's always about preempting what your intake is needed, which is difficult, because when you're paddling for 12, 16 hours a day, 5 days in a row, it really ramps up what your body needs to keep fueling. So on general, I was probably eating 2 to 3 times what I would normally eat in a day, as in calorie count. But if you ramp up and have 5, 6, 7 really hard days consecutively, I'd be well over 10,000 calories in a day, and would eat 3 meals in one sitting at times, because you just ravenous. It's funny how the body speaks to you as well. The main things my body always speaks to me about is beyond and beyond ridiculous amounts of water, hydration, ridiculous amounts of fat. It loves fat, and just I would quite happily mop up the juice from bacon being cooked, because it calls to you. Simple things like that. So you've got all the amazing nutrition and things you're doing, but things like fat, it just really needs, and protein in different forms. The body's crying out to be repaired, and protein, whether it's meat or nuts or whatever, it's crying out for that all the time, with, of course, plenty of sleep when you can get it. And I could sleep on a bed of nails quite easily. So to fall asleep in between paddles when you've got half an hour and it's pouring with rain and you're lying on the beach wasn't a problem for me. And that's essential. That really is essential. Have that ability.
Wow. You talked, I'm just picking up on what you're saying. I'm trying to understand. So there's a difference between paddleboarding along the coast versus out far. Like, how far from the mainland would you be out paddling?
Well, to keep the distance to 4,000 kilometers around our mainland Britain, you have to go from headland to headland, really. You can't hug the coast, because I'd still be paddling now if that was the case, because the distance would be huge. So from some headland to headlands, you could be 20, 30 kilometers from any land. And that's just the way it is. It's just what you have to do. And you also have to understand that the conditions 1 or 2 kilometers from land are completely different 5, 10, 20 kilometers from land, both good and bad. And you have to be prepared for that. And that's where the understanding of what water is doing, and how water and weather and water affect each other. Lots of places on the south coast, that's really easy to predict and understand and see and fold in front of you. When you start to get to places in Wales and Scotland where you've got mountains, because mountains create their own weather that can't be predicted, you just have to understand and see it. That's when those changes and understandings need to be implemented. And that's a huge factor. I would say of my paddling, if we said paddling was 20%, then 40% would be understanding the water, and then the other 40% would be understanding the weather. I'm reading clouds miles ahead. I'm reading what the wind is doing in relation to the land, in relation to the tides, well ahead to plan for it and prepare for it. And you do have to become a little bit of a guru, really, on it. Again, otherwise you'd have to stay really close to the land. It would probably take 2 years to do something like this if you actually stayed close to the land the whole way. So it's a really important part to understand and portray and put across and make others understand that that's such a big thing.
You said something that really opened my mind a little bit. You said we're an island, and you think, as someone from England, when we refer to Ireland, we think, Pirates of the Caribbean. We think, they're going to Fiji Island. We think Bahamas. Those are nice images of islands, but we're an island, and you're right. And I guess, what are some of the beautiful things you've seen of this island that we don't realize is there, that we take for granted?
Well, I love the fact that I now view our island in such a different way. I actually see it as a proper island, because I'm like looking in on it. And that's joyful to have that sort of understanding, which not many people have ever seen it in that way. So that's wonderful. But also, you then really see how diverse our island is. So the the sandy beaches that we have in the south and the warmth compared to the vast cliffs and seabirds. And there are places in Scotland where you can't hear yourself for 10 hours because the birds are so loud and it's their world. Seeing stags on the beach, seeing otters playing, seeing hundreds of dolphins, whether in Wales or Norfolk, seeing hundreds of dolphins, not just one or two, seeing thousands of seals. I mean, we've got some colonies on our island where there's 20,000 seals on a beach, and 1,000 of those seals want to come and get on your board. So it's amazing what we've got, and the diversity of the different types of beaches, different types of water. The sea water is completely different in Cornwall than it is to Norfolk, completely different to how it is in North Wales, both in its feel, in its look, in its content. It's all there. You see all this amazing, wonderful stuff, but of course you also see the bad bits, which are the man-made bits, whether that's sewage being pumped in, and our water companies can be devious in their ability to pump out sewage, raw sewage, when the visibility is bad or we've got bad weather. Seeing the impact of litter on our beaches, seeing beaches in Scotland, secluded beaches that you can't get to unless you're on some form of watercraft, where the plastic waste, predominantly from fishing waste, is stacked up like a JCB has pushed it all up the beach. It's amount you'd have to physically climb over it. That's how much physical sea waste, sea fishing waste there is. Seeing all that aspect of the ugly parts of seeing how an island has the good, the bad, and the ugly of all these things.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And I know that you guys have been documenting the whole journey, and I really looking forward to kind of seeing the world through your eyes and seeing some of the experiences, because that's powerful. And I was sat here a minute ago just before coming on, and I'm rewatching the live of when you come back into Torbay. You've got all your friends, your family, the Torbay community out on the beach, welcoming you home after circumnavigating the UK. And I'm like, I'm not crying, you're crying. And it was incredible just seeing you come in, the reception that you got, and then being able to walk under those paddles with your family. Like, talk to us about what that day was like coming home to Torbay.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, it was amazing. You with an expedition, you're very conscious not to wish the time away, but to enjoy the time. But of course, you're always wishing for that end, or looking towards that end, I should say. In my mind, it was very simple. I leave Torbay, I turn right, and I keep turning right until one day I'll do that right-hand turn to come back into Torbay. So to take that right-hand turn and actually see Torbay unfold in front of me on such a beautiful evening was just something that's really hard to articulate, really hard to kind of explain, but it's in the core in how that affects you, and how you see the love and the caring from so many people just to see you back safely. So it was magical to have the people on the water, and then to have family and friends, and to have, as you say, the paddles to walk under. It's a memory I'll have forever. It's a memory that I bottled, and I'll open that bottle ever in the future just to get a bit of that back sometime. Yeah. But it's amazing, and I'm using that now in the legacy in the next 6 months of what I'm trying to achieve for the benefit of water safety on this island, really.
Yeah. We'll finish up with that legacy, and I just would love to know what was going through your mind. What were you saying to yourself when you took that knee on the beach, when you finally landed?
Well, I'm a man of faith. So, I believe in a creator. And really, when I took that knee, I took a knee before I left to bless and help me. through 141 days. And I just took that knee when I came back in, just to thank, my Lord, just to say thank you for keeping me safe, keeping the team safe, and the ending and all that we've done. And, I did it not for effect, because I did it because I truly needed to say thanks for that moment. And it's a powerful image, and lots of people comment on it. When you see our island in the way that I've seen it, all the different things I saw just in that 141 days alone, it does make you think about so many things. And whether you believe in a creator or have a faith, it's a powerful thing just to kind of give thanks to whoever you would normally give thanks to. And for me, it's a creator, and I was given thanks for just getting me back safely. Yeah. So it's a big moment for me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Our family definitely sent you up a few prayers to keep you going, and it's just amazing moment just to see. And your team have captured those moments beautifully.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the legacy of the Long Paddle 2021. Obviously, you've done it for not just to raise awareness, but for a good cause too. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes. So we wanted to help 7 different charities to give them a bit of a boost from what we did. And it gives people the options that they can either donate to help those 7 different charities. So check out our website for that. And then the personal aspect for me was to sponsor and try and get a solution to our water safety problem in this country. And the problem is we've got 9 million children at school, and less than 3 million of those, at very best, get some form of water safety training in their school career. And yet water safety, just like maths, is on the national curriculum to be taught. But the problem is teachers are taught how to teach maths, but teachers aren't taught how to teach water safety. And because it's a little bit technical and you've got to get it right in what you're teaching, teachers obviously just think, oh, I can't do that, and don't. And it's not their fault that they're not trained to do that. So it's left off or left to other people to try and pick up where the teachers don't necessarily teach it. So whether that's swim teachers or external agencies coming into school to teach it. And of course, with 9 million children, that just doesn't happen. So the best way we can teach our children is to help our teachers teach them. So a 21st century solution to that has got to be away from pen and paper. There's got to be an app. So lots of the games I have played with kids over the last 25 years, we're putting into an app form. So you can actually play a game. And in playing that game, you're learning about water safety. And what is revolutionary about this gamified app we're putting together is we can make it specific to areas. So your waterways where you are, where there's canals and rivers and streams, we can actually take video footage of one of those canals where you would go and paddleboard every day. And within that, we can play the games at that location. So a child can actually think, I've been here before, haven't I? Because I played the game. I know where dangers are, or I know where safety can be gained if we need it. So whether it's the coast or inland waterways, we can put that together. But of course, these things cost a huge amount of money. Putting it together, the ideas for it, the games, is the easy bit. It's finding the money to actually pay for it and make it look good and make it so children want to play it. So the legacy, especially for the next 6 months, is me gaining as much funding for this app, this gamified water safety app, as possible, because we need really the best part of $250,000 to make it happen on the first phase.
Wow, that's incredible. We get a little bit of sponsor money here at Always Bet Yesterday. I'd like to put my sponsorship money and I donate that towards your great cause. And I would just encourage all of our listeners, if Brendon's story has captured your heart, if there's anything in Brendon's story, in his heart and his why, then please, I'd encourage you to go and donate to Brendon. Thank you for coming to spend some time with us. I've absolutely loved hearing probably just a snippet of your journey around the UK. What were the highlights for you? If you could just sum up the highlights of your 141 days circumnavigating the UK, what would it be?
Well, most people want to hear about the wildlife, but really for me, the wildlife was amazing. The coastline was amazing. And I could talk about that all day, but the highlights for me were the people I met around the country. We are so diverse in our people. The humor of the South compared to the North, the what we wear, how we talk, how we act, on the north coast of Scotland compared to the west coast of Wales, compared to the east coast of England. It's also different, but amazing at the same time. And I love that interaction with the different humans around our island. And I've got some friends now that, I'll have forever because of, what we went through together, how I saw them at different parts of this expedition. So for me, it would be the people of Great Britain, the people of our mainland island that made a difference for me, gave me motivation, gave me love, the kindness, the hospitality, and the ability just to have a chat on a beach. Our coastal communities are wonderful communities, and we should be celebrated at all times. And that's what I love the most, I think, really.
I love that. And I really get the sense of love and enjoyment and passion and enthusiasm, because like day after your challenge, you do the school run and then you're back down at the beach talking about, look at this, look at the water, look how flat it is, and the excitement for the water. Like, this isn't even 141 days out there. You've not, I'm sure there were days where you loathed it, but you've kept your love for it. This is you're a missional man. And I'm just excited to see the legacy as it plays out. And what is the immediate future for you at the moment? What is your focus?
My focus is really speaking to as many people as possible about what has been done and what we can do. My focus is getting a continual message of water safety out there. It's fearful when we've got such beautiful days. In October, the water's starting to get a bit cooler. What are the implications of that on the beach? So continue getting the message out there. The next 6 months for me are paddleboarding, because I love it, getting in the sea for my own mindfulness and well-being, but sitting in front of a computer, sitting on the end of a phone, building the legacy of the long paddle and all the implications that's involved with that. To get this app working, I want to get it into schools next September. And I won't do that just by sitting back. I got to work as hard now as I did when I was on the paddleboard to make it happen.
What hero. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming and share your story. Really, really, really grateful. I'll share all the links in the comments. I'll, if you feel compelled to donate, please do that. You'll find all the information in the show notes. Brendon, we'd be honored if you'd leave us with a final thought from your good self.
A final thought. So it's really difficult, isn't it, to wrap things up in a final thought. I would say, for me, wherever you are, the next time you go through and near water, whether that's on, near, or around water, just challenge yourself. Have you got the right equipment? Have you got the right mindset? Have you got the right ability? Are you standing in the right place when you're near water? Over 100 people in Great Britain die every year, drown every year through not actually wanting to go in the water. They had no intention of going in the water, and yet they still drown. So, don't be one of the 600 that drown every year in the whole of Great Britain. Just challenge yourself. And if you're with your family, challenge everybody. Are we doing the right thing around water? Because we take it for granted. And unfortunately, the 600 people that take it for granted, drown in this country alone, let alone the 340,000 that drown around the whole of the planet every single year. It's mind-boggling.
Powerful. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. God bless.